everyone, and welcome to part 2 about nonviolent communication. So in the previous video I've kind of explained the basics of it and the general approach, and in this video I want to go a little bit deeper and I want to explain to you like things that I've come across on my research or during my readings that I found so helpful. So the first one are sentences or words when you're stuck in a fight and there's just no moving forward or backward and you're just both stuck there. A lot of times it can be a case of removing yourself from the situation to breathe a bit and to just hit pause for a bit. But then how do you unlock this situation? And I'm gonna be using my cheat sheets with the giraffes, but I'm gonna read them out to you because these sentences I found can be so helpful to actually re-establish connection or move to a new place in the fight or discussion or argument. So the first one is, would you be willing to tell me what you heard? Just completely objectively asking to see what the other person has heard from or how they interpreted what I've said. I found this really good. The next one is, did I get it or is there more? This just unlocks this, because I learned this in a seminar about kids ages ago, but children, when they're emotionally very full and very have a lot of things that need to be expressed, you need to give them the space to just unburden themselves, to just take out of this big bag full of stones that they've accumulated during the day, just take out one stone after the other and just this happened and done. As adults we're not that different. So I love the sentence, did I get it? Just like that, or did I get it or is there more? And then that's an invitation for the other person to keep talking. The next one is, how can I better meet your needs? And don't say this if you're not gonna if you don't authentically mean it, but it can be such a nice place, because all of a sudden if you're in an argument you realize, wait a minute, we're actually both trying to meet our needs here, and this person's offering, or I'm offering in this case, to meet your needs better so you feel better. That's so kind, and it just opens up a new level of discussion or of care. The other one is, can you give me an example? And here it's kind of you have to be careful not to, the other person has to be, not to veer into blaming or you always do this or this kind of thing. But I think sometimes examples are very specific examples. If they are said exactly how I said in the last video, with a specific situation and the feeling and the need that came with it, I think they can be very helpful to just understand each other, because you might be oh my god, that's not at all how I meant it, but it makes sense now, which is where we want to be, right? The last one is, how are you feeling? Are you feeling? Or what do you need from me? Or what do you need in general? Just what do you need right now? And that's such a simple question that can express a lot of care in communication. So yeah, I found all of these really helpful to, if I get stuck in an argument or a discussion, to remind the other person, this is still a caring communication. I care about you, I care about your feelings, I care about your needs, and just to give that continued reassurance and support. Number 2, I think it's really helpful to remind yourself and have a list of what aren't actually feelings, because we always use these words that are interpretations or passive aggressive comments that aren't actually describing our feelings, and because they're so common, we can all just easily slip into those expressions when actually it's not the underlying feeling we're talking about. I'm going to give you the list of, a list of words that aren't actually feelings but interpretations. What I found really helpful to remember is that a lot of these interpretations start with mis or un, like I feel misunderstood or I feel unloved, and oftentimes they end with ed, like I feel belittled. The other thing to remember is that interpretations always require the action of someone else. You can't feel abandoned unless someone else abandoned you. So in that case, this isn't a feeling, this is more like a way to blame someone or interpret their behavior as being abandoned in our heads, but it's not actually objectively talking about their behavior or our feelings. Interpretations, the problem with it that is that oftentimes the listener gets defensive and shuts down, because if you tell someone I feel unloved, that implies you're not loving me enough, you've not done enough, you've not done enough effort, and then the other person shuts down. So I'm going to give you this list now, but this isn't exhaustive, but it can give you a good idea. Abandoned, abused, alienated, belittled, betrayed, blamed, bullied, cheated, coerced, criticized, discounted, distrusted, disrespected, ignored, insulted, intimidated, invisible, isolated, judged, left out, manipulated, misunderstood, neglected, patronized, pressured, provoked, put down, rejected, ripped off, taken advantage of, threatened, tricked, unappreciated, unheard, unloved, unseen, unsupported, unwanted, used, victimized, violated, and wronged. So they sound very harsh read like this in one way, and they are, rightfully so, but I think it is quite easy to slip into them, like to say, I feel completely misunderstood, which isn't actually a feeling, it's just blaming you for not understanding me. Anyway, so this was point 2, which I found very valuable. So number 3 of my top tips is you can give yourself empathy. If you feel like in this conversation you need to take yourself away because you're so desperate to be right or feel seen or feel heard or any of that, you need to say, listen, can we pause this for a second? You need to take yourself away and you need to give yourself love and empathy. And there are some processes you can follow to do this. I mean, the easiest way to do that is just to pretend you're like your own best friend and you give yourself empathy. Like, you're like, I understand, you feel really alone right now and because of like this situation, and like really pretend how you would talk to a friend if they just needed to feel seen and heard, and talk to yourself that way. And I know it sounds a bit weird, but it does work because you really start to be on your own quote unquote side. And it might sound like, obviously don't do this so you're like kind of get angrier and angrier with the other person, but do this to kind of soothe yourself and fulfill that need to be seen and heard, because you can see and hear yourself. And it's really powerful to give yourself empathy and to be like, yeah, I understand, because also you know yourself best. You know the traumas and the past and everything you've been through, and you know exactly why the situation would evoke that feeling. So I think it's very important to talk to yourself in a gentle way in this regard first, before you can meet the other person, if you're feeling like a desperate need to be seen and heard. So for this process, nonviolent communication, and especially if the other person has never heard of it or doesn't know anything about it, it's really important for your cup to be full, for you to have a lot of patience actually, because otherwise you can't do it because your cup is so empty. So fill your cup first, take yourself away and fill your own cup with love, understanding, soothing. Another way of doing this can be to just do something like meditative or like a sensory toy, or they use that with kids apparently in schools in like these corners where they can self-soothe, which is so nice to learn as a child, right? But yeah, so you can do that as an adult, and there are some meditative practices you can also use to fill your own cup if you don't want to do like the best buddy, I hear you, I feel you needs. You can meditate, you can sing a song to yourself or put some music on or dance a bit. You can journal and ask yourself questions and write things down like, what are my needs, or what needs aren't being met, or how am I feeling? You can visualize. You can either visualize talking to yourself or visualize how you would love for the other person to respond and just nurture yourself. And from that visualization, you can derive your needs. Like if you visualize the other person just giving you a hug, that might mean your need is actually just for closeness and for this fight to be over, and not really about like any of the things you've been arguing about. Yeah, there's loads of technique. I'm not going to go into them, but do something to self-soothe and fill your cup, which is really important, because then you can do the next step, which is to remind yourself when you're in a good place yourself that actually the other person doesn't mean to harm me. They're just trying to express their needs. But this might be hard to see if your cup is completely empty and you're trying to scrape the last bits out of that cup to give the other person compassion during the fight. But when your cup is full, you might actually see that and realize that and like, hold on a minute, they love me or they care about working with me. They're just trying to express their needs. And that's like ideally the realization you get to from this exercise of filling your own cup. So once you've reached that understanding that the other person's actually not trying to harm you, obviously, if they are, and if this is getting to be really toxic, you need to remove yourself from the situation. Please don't understand this as we can make everything work, because we can't. Some people are just in too much pain, and then you need to keep yourself safe and remove yourself. Anyway, assuming the other person doesn't want to harm you in this situation, and you know that, and it's just been a miscommunication and you're actually just both trying to express unmet needs, but your overall relationship is healthy, then you can go back, and this time you can focus on giving real empathy and really listening to the other person and their needs, because you know your needs will be heard, and they have already been heard and acknowledged by yourself in the previous exercise. So then you're open. And now I found this really interesting, because this is a list of things that aren't actually empathy but we think they are, and this is like a new level of listening with your friends or your family when you try to not do the following things. Sometimes they can meet the other person's need to be heard or seen, but we have to always make sure we check in if that's actually what they want. Like, it's the classic example of oh, I've been doing all the dishes. Oh, well, I should have helped you. No, that's not what I wanted. I just wanted appreciation for doing them, you know? So yeah, so I'm going to give you the list of what's not empathy, so you can focus when you go back after the self-soothing on really giving empathy. So the first one is advice. That's not really empathy. It can be helpful, but you have to check if that's what the other person wants. The next one is correcting someone. No, I don't think that's how it happened, or I don't think that's what the other person... You may be right, you may be totally right, but empathy is never about being right or wrong. It's just about simply receiving the other person and their needs and their feelings. The next one is tell a story. Be like, oh yeah, that happened to me the other day, da 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 da. Then you make it about yourself, which is also not empathy. The next one is explain and analyze. Like, no, that's actually not da 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 da, and you interrupt the other person. When actually, in this moment, you just need to sit, listen, and receive all of their feelings and needs, and then you can explain and afterwards. That comes all afterwards. But in this moment, the person's not ready to hear you yet. They're not ready to hear your side of the story or your explanation or your analysis. They're just trying to first be heard and seen and acknowledged. Another one is that shuts people down is push away the feelings. Oh, don't be sad, or no, there's no need for you to be afraid, really. Also not empathy. The other one, which is like the storytelling, but it's like one-upping someone. Like, oh my god, that's nothing. Listen to what happened to me the other day. That's also not empathy, that's also not listening. The other one is like a denial of choice. Being like, yeah, I mean, it sucks, but we all have to do that. Or like, I know, but I have to work too. Like, why are you complaining about it? It seems so obvious now, but it's so common, you wouldn't believe it. The next one is just nodding and smiling and like, which can be good because it's feedback that we're hearing it, but sometimes it's also not what the other person needs to just constantly. I had this where I was like, why is that person smiling in my head, like as I was telling the story? Why are they nodding? They're trying to give empathy, but it's not what I needed at the moment. So just, be really in touch with your body when you do certain things, or like people have their eyes wander and you're like, or they check their phone or something like that, like those little actions. The other one is evaluating, which I find like, oh my god, it's like basically like, yeah, but that's normal. Like, me saying if your feelings are valid or not, or if they're a valid response to something, which we think is really helpful, like to kind of call other people out on their shit and be like, no, you're completely overreacting. He wasn't like doing anything. So sometimes it can be exactly like helpful and useful for the other person to realize like, oh, actually, I might have misinterpreted that situation. But make sure they're in a place where they can hear it. If they first need to have a rant and talk, you can receive that and then afterwards say, in a more gentle way, kind of lead them towards understanding that actually their realizations might not be as objective as they thought, and they might just be interpretations of behavior, or they might be overthinking. But don't interrupt and say that. Listen, you're overthinking, because then their bag isn't emptied yet. They need to empty that bag, and then you can gently tell them. The next one is cheerleading, which I always thought it was such a good thing to do, but actually it's only a good thing to do if the other person needs that. Like if the other person is like, oh, my job is really hard, and you're like, yeah, go on, just 2 more weeks, then you'll have some time off, it'll be fine, and you really like your colleagues, don't you? It can be so annoying if that's not what you wanted to hear. And it's a bit better to always check in. Does this person actually just need to be listened and seen and heard? Do I need to repeat to them what they've been saying? Yeah, your job, you've been really like stressed with your job. Like something like that, and not really being like hyped up for doing something. So this is all about empathy, giving yourself empathy so you can give empathy to other people, and checking in with them before what it is they actually need. So there are others such as educating themselves or pointing out the positives, like, yeah, I know it's bad, but see it from this side or see it from that side, which also sometimes can be not what a person needs. And the other one is just fully agreeing with everything they say, like, yeah, man, he's such a jerk, and I always said that, like, he's no good. Like, this also can't be always helpful and can also not be exactly what the other person needs. Obviously, none of this is wrong if it's the thing that the other person needs. So I think be very sensitive and check in with what is it that the other person needs in this before just choosing one strategy, like either saying everything they say is right, or educating themselves, or telling your own experiences. Like, all of these have their place. Like, sometimes sharing your own experience can be very helpful to the other person. Sometimes pointing out a different angle can be very helpful. Sometimes helping them feel seen and heard by acknowledging what they're saying is true can be very helpful, but just be very sensitive to that. Number 4 is my favorite one, and it just shows what amazing people are out there. Because like all of these things that I'm sharing with you, I've seen on like blogs and books and like research papers, and it's just incredible to see how much love is out there and how much determination to improve our communication. And yeah, it's just incredible. So number 4 is how you use NVC for gratitude, and you can do this to yourself, like just write it in a journal, or you can also do it, like share it with the other person if you feel comfortable doing that. And it's called Giraffe Gratitude Journal. I found this on a website, and it's just incredible. I've talked about giraffes and their big hearts, and it's just the cutest. So this is how you do it. First, you state the situation objectively, like when she called me last night, and then you state the feeling. I felt warm, I felt open, and then you state the need that was being met, like because my need for connection was met, or because my need for love and appreciation was met. And isn't this like the most beautiful way ever to give gratitude, like to either just note it down for yourself and just like feel the feeling again, or to share it with the other person. As precise as we are with the negative ones when we talk about unmet needs, be just as precise with the positive ones, because it can be just so nice to open up a feelings wheel and just go through the good feelings and be like, oh, what am I feeling? Like I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling warm, feeling open, and all of that, like vulnerable maybe. Really feel those feelings, because it's a gift really. And you can also use this, it doesn't always have to include other people, you can use this for your own stuff. Like when I did what I said I was going to do by finishing the essay today, I feel proud, I feel pleased, I feel happy, I feel relieved. Yeah, you got it. I just love this. What a nice way to give gratitude. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.